right. Well, it's 11:30, and then we are officially kicking off Homes Tour 2022 with Pleasant Valley House, Lemmo Architecture and Design. Stephanie and Ryan and Michael Bennett is our moderator today. I'm Ingrid Spencer. I'm the executive director for AIA Austin, and I'm so honored to kick it off. So I just want to say thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to all of the companies that sponsor the Homes Tour, and especially these gold sponsors sponsoring this particular house. They worked on this house and they're part of the magic. So now I'm going to turn things over to the Lemmos and Michael, and let's get it going.
Thanks, Ingrid.
Hey, hello, everybody. Welcome. My name is Michael Bennett. I'm a senior associate at Shioka Design. I've been here for about 8 years now. And yeah, I'm really excited to be doing the very first one of these. That's fun. We're gonna set it up and just kick it off great. So for everyone attending, if you have questions, you can type them into the Q&A box that you can see, and then I'll kind of watch for those. And at the end, I can go through and help ask some of the questions that you have. So let's see, I'm going to introduce Lemmo to you guys. So we've got, excuse me, Stephanie Lemma, who is the principal and co-founder. She received her Bachelor of Architecture degree from Rice University. Originally born in Puebla, Mexico, Stephanie has strong roots with her Hispanic heritage and multicultural background. With over 10 years of experience, she previously worked for prestigious firms in Boston and New York City, including Ki Sung Woo Architects, Ann Beha Architects, Hay Cobb Fried & Partners, and Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. Stephanie brings a unique perspective to all the projects she works on with her interest in both architecture and landscape design. Stephanie has taught a design studio at the University of Texas School of Architecture and has been a design critic there, as well as Tulane University. She also serves as the current AIA Austin WIA Women in Architecture Chair for the year 2022, as a panelist for the City of Austin's Cultural Arts Division, Art and Public Spaces, and as a member of the Texas Society of Architects Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. And then we have Ryan. Ryan Lemmo, AIA, is a principal and co-founder of Lemmo Architecture and Design, an award-winning practice in Austin, Texas. Ryan received his Bachelor of Architecture degree from Rice University and then worked as a project manager at Marian Thompson Architects in Cambridge, Massachusetts. After co-founding Lemmo Architecture and Design in 2014, Ryan successfully brought a diverse range of thoughtfully designed, regionally influenced projects to completion in Central Texas. Ryan has taught at the University of Texas School of Architecture and has served as an invited design critic at Northeastern University, Harvard University, Wentworth Institute of Technology, UT San Antonio, and UT Austin. Ryan is a licensed architect in Texas, New York, and Massachusetts. So I think now I will go ahead and just kick it off to you guys. I'm gonna turn my camera off until the end and then let you guys have the floor or the Zoom.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael, for that introduction. We're so excited. Welcome, everybody. We're really excited to be here. And we also want to say thank you to Ingrid and thank you to the AIA Austin Homes Tour Committee for putting together this amazing event. As we were saying kind of at the beginning in our kind of chit chat, so we're really excited to be presenting this Pleasant Valley house. This is our personal home, and so we're just really excited to be presenting it to you and kind of giving you that unique perspective to just kind of as being both the client and designer of this home. We first want to also start by thanking the sponsors as well. It's really important to have just really key players that really help execute and lead to a successful project. And so Fort Structures was the structural engineer of this home. Waller Build Company was the contractor for this home. Christinic Hardwood Flooring, Alpha Granite and Tile, Western Window Systems, Freedom Solar Power, and Ferguson. Again, thank you for just some great partners throughout this project. So first, we're going to start by giving you all a little bit of background into who we are, when we started and why we started our firm, and kind of just our general design philosophy. And so just kind of roll back. I know you heard a little bit of it about this in our intro, but Ryan and I first met at Rice University, and that's where we graduated. We did graduate during the recession. But we got really lucky and we were fortunate to land some great jobs in Boston. And those jobs really did have an influence on kind of who we are today and kind of the project itself that we'll be presenting today. Ryan worked at Marianne Thompson Architects, which kind of focuses on high-end residential projects in the Northeast, but they really do a really wonderful job of integrating and tying into the landscape. And I'm going to also bring attention kind of to my experience having worked at Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. You might be familiar with his work. He specifically, well, the firm worked on the Waller Creek Conservancy here in Waterloo Greenway, I'm sorry, here in Austin. And so both of these experiences really played into kind of who we became today. Another thing I want to point out is that we're really interested in deliberately working on different project types and different project scales. So you'll see that kind of here in the different projects that Ryan's going to kind of touch on, but we like to work on anything, you know, commercial, residential, and anything in between. We just like to keep things interesting, and we'll see some kind of key components and key themes in our work that Ryan will touch on here.
For sure. So we just wanted to really briefly run through 3 of our projects that sort of influenced this Pleasant Valley house. So the first one is this project called the Clear Rock Ranch. This is one of our first projects. And what we really wanted to highlight with this project was our work with local fabricators. So we work with a wonderful steel group called Longhorn Welding, who we continued a relationship with after this project, and they did a lot of the steel work in our own personal home. And again, as we mentioned, we really wanted to highlight just our sort of theme that runs through a lot of our work, which is situating sort of more contemporary architecture within a natural environment. So obviously in this context, it's a very rural site, the sort of untouched rural landscape. But again, the framing of that landscape was of critical importance to this particular project.
And so in kind of contrast to Clear Rock Ranch, this is in a more urban context. This is in downtown Austin at the Lamar Pedestrian Bridge. This is the Park Tower canopy, really just recently completed. So we're really excited about it. But as you can see, again, just much like Clear Rock Ranch, this is a pavilion that's really kind of taking its form to kind of open up to the views and taking in the reacting to the surrounding context, but also incorporating these existing trees and landscape. Also, as Ryan was mentioning in Clear Rock Ranch, it was really important to us to work with great collaborators and fabricators. I'm sure many of you are familiar with Boomtown Design, and we worked with them on the install of this, and they were just great at executing all of our details. It's one thing to kind of, you know, draw them, but, you know, to actually really have a successful team to execute them is just as important. And that's something we'll talk about throughout our presentation. We also worked with Fort Structures, the structural engineer, local here to East Austin, and then also Harvest Lumber, also local to East Austin, which is where we're located. And they provided all the wood that you see here on the soffit on the underside of this shade canopy.
Yep, and they also worked on our personal home, which is why we're yes. tying it together. And just lastly, again, just to sort of bring it to the residential scales, a wonderful little home that we did in the Travis Heights area. And again, just simple sort of making sure that the architecture and the landscape really works together. Obviously, this is in a residential neighborhood with a newly constructed landscape. Again, just themes that you'll see throughout our work as we move forward here. So jumping into our home, into the Pleasant Valley house, we want to sort of go over the origins of the home a little bit. And before we even started this project, we really knew that it was going to be based off of our personal experiences, right? So we didn't have clients to press against. And so this really is sort of a collection of our own personal experience that you'll see how that played out throughout the project. And again, before we started the design of this home, we knew that we were on a really limited budget. And so that's something, a theme that's you'll see throughout this presentation, throughout the home, is all the little things that we did to try to make sure that this would be affordable to us. Again, before we even started, we knew that meant the house was going to have to be small. It couldn't be too big. So it's just over 2,000 square feet for a 4-bedroom home, which is pretty compact. And we also knew that we wanted to move pretty quickly. This wasn't going to be necessarily our forever home where we were highlighting every little trick and detail we've ever done as architects. we knew we wanted it to, again, be cost effective and move quickly. So we sort of sketched it in a weekend. We had some great folks at our office help put the drawings together over a summer and built the whole house in under 10 months, despite the pandemic. So again, just that a lot of little moments and tricks that we tried to pull to make sure that it came in at the budget that we needed it to.
So here's just a little bit of context to our site. As we mentioned before, we're located in East Austin. Both our office and the house that we ultimately, the site that we ultimately selected. And this was really important to us because when we started our firm in 2014 and when we moved here, we did start our firm essentially right after we moved to Austin, leaving Boston. It was really important to us to be in East Austin from the outset. So we lived in East Austin from the beginning. And East Austin was just really what we were attracted to from the outset for its diversity and its walkability and just kind of, there's so many amazing local fabricators and creatives here in East Austin. And so other needs for the site that were important to us is, again, tying into that walkability component, being close to our office, as Ryan mentioned, being affordable, and then finding a lot that was still kind of large enough to incorporate a landscape, because again, that was just something that we were really passionate about. And so that's kind of where we landed. As you can see here, we're on East Austin, east of I-35, located on Pleasant Valley Road and very close to the Colorado River. Here's a zoom in of the actual site. And on the upper left-hand corner, you can see land, which is our office, Lemmo Architecture and Design. It's located just a few blocks away. And so again, this project was kind of came out of necessity. At the time we were living, it was a crazy time. It was, right when we were, the pandemic we didn't know was about to occur. But we were living in the office, and the office is a unique structure that's 1,000 square foot. And it's zoned to be either commercial or residential. So we did have that flexibility, but it was only 1,000 square feet. And we literally built a wall to separate our residents from the office. And so it kind of became a bit chaos when our daughter arrived. And so we had a baby, and that's when we realized very quickly that we were in much need for a new home and for kind of just setting out for the future. And so we ultimately kind of set our sights on this really unique and interesting lot. Again, right off Pleasant Valley. And so Brian will kind of get into the specifics of why this lot was interesting to us.
Yeah, and as Steph said, literally this was the most affordable lot that was walking distance to the office. And it sort of had this really unique urban context. So again, right on Pleasant Valley, which is a 4-lane road, so pretty busy, pretty loud. But it's also in this unique urban context that's interesting for Austin. All the hatched buildings here are commercial buildings. So we're along this alley just to the north of our lot here. And that alley we share with auto mechanics shops, auto body shops. Across the street, there's a liquor store, convenience store. And then we have these little old single family homes that are sort of dotted around and mixed in with this sort of light industrial or commercial context. And so it was a really interesting and unique site to create a piece of architecture that fits into that context. And then ultimately, just to kind of give you a visual, this is before we started the project. Again, these sort of smaller single family homes on either side, this 4-lane road right out front, again, it's right on this really busy road, the alley off to the side, sort of peeking behind those trees, you can start to see these large warehouses. They're sort of almost 2 stories for the auto mechanics shops as well.
All right, so now we're going to kind of give you a general project overview. We're going to talk a bit about the program and again, tie it to how we kept things affordable for our budget. We're also going to talk to you a little bit about the structure and the materiality of the home. And so here is the general floor plan. And so as Ryan was talking, again, we really just we love this site and it's kind of have this long, skinny site. And what we loved about it ultimately was the alley, because Pleasant Valley Road can get incredibly busy during traffic hour. And so it was really important to us to have a different ultimate entry to the home. And so what we really did was we used this kind of front courtyard here, what you see with the cars. That's really what we planned on from the beginning to just be the kind of the guest entry entrance. And so what we use on a regular day-to-day entrance really is kind of more this alley entrance. And so kind of that's our day-to-day entry. And then back here behind the home is kind of what we use for our daily entry in and out of the home with our cars. And this is where we park. And so this floor plan, as you can see, again, is 2,100 square feet, 4 bedroom, 3 bath, quite compact. It's a 2-volume structure, again, just 2 stacked volumes, and just kind of for simplicity. And this bottom volume was really used primarily for the shared public space. And so here on the left-hand side, you can see kind of the living, kitchen, and dining. And again, we'll talk a little bit more detail about this dining table, but this was a way of space saving and also cost saving by eliminating a whole dining room in itself. And this sort of back room is kind of what we call a flex room. It's currently used. My mother is here, in fact, just now using it as a guest bedroom to kind of watch our son as we're presenting now, who's 2 months old. But yeah, so this is a guest bedroom, and it's also used as an office space as well as a play space for our children. And then again, kind of this guest bathroom here that was important for us to access for both a guest bedroom, but also for ourselves. And upstairs was kind of more of the private spaces. And so this here on the upper left is the main bedroom, the main bathroom. And again, we'll talk more detail, but these are the closets that really are Ikea closets that really conserve space. And then the 2 children's bedrooms and the children's bathroom here. And this is a laundry room.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
We wanted to just highlight these 2 different entrances. So on the left is the alley entrance, sort of where we come and go day to day. And on the right is the Pleasant Valley entrance as well.
And here's a view from the alley. Again, it's really actually a pretty large alley entrance. And again, this is kind of what ultimately sold us on the lot. And we also want to just point out, so this is kind of our more day-to-day entry. This is a gate where we come in for our car. And again, this CMU block wall kind of is a reaction where this 2-story structure is facing a 2-story car mechanics warehouse shop just right across from the alley.
Exactly. And so just to really talk about the massing of the building a little bit, we wanted to make sure that because it's a sort of small urban lot, that we knew we wanted to design the entire lot. It was super important to us. And very broadly, because we knew we wanted to sort of have this landscape component, we sort of inverted the typical front yard backyard dynamic. And so instead of having a large backyard with the house sort of pressed against the front, we pushed it almost as far back as we possibly could with the 10-foot setback to have as much courtyard and landscape pressed against the front as we possibly could. And also that, as Steph mentioned earlier, sort of pushing our 2-story volume to the back allows it to relate more to the light industrial context as well. The 2 volumes, again, as Steph mentioned, are just these 2 shifted bars, which create really nice shaded breezeway along the north side of the house and a sort of protected overhang on the front. And what it also does is just, again, you can see the overhangs and the breezeway here, but it also just allows for a really simple move that creates a more interesting sectional quality inside the space. So this is in our living room, which I think almost exactly where we're sitting right now. And you can see the sort of shifted volume allows for this sort of pop up on the side, and also allows for these clear story windows to add light from above, which is really, really important to us.
And so now we're going to kind of talk about the structure,
yeah,
and then we're going to dive into the materiality. So you want to talk about
for sure? Yeah. So again, just to keep things affordable, it's a really simple slab on grade structure, 2x6 framing all the way around to make sure we're getting the insulation that we want. And sort of the most interesting thing from the structural perspective is the floor between the first and second floor is all just a 2-foot truss. And we originally thought to sort of achieve this deep cantilever, we were going to need a lot more of structural trickery. We work with fort structures and sort of calibrated that overhang to make sure that it could work with a standard 2-foot truss. So that 6-foot overhang sort of is the spanning capacity or the cantilever capacity of that truss, which allowed us to really like reduce the additional structure that we need to achieve this. There is a little bit of steel for the double cantilever and a moment frame around this large opening, but otherwise, again, as simple as we could on framing and using the sort of inherent qualities of material to achieve the volumetric look that we were going for.
Right. So now we're going to kind of dive into the materiality of the home, and I'm going to use this slide to talk about the exterior materials. And so for the bottom structure, volume, we used a corrugated metal siding. Again, that's to kind of relate to kind of the auto mechanic shop that's across the alley. And then the top volume is a burnished plaster. And both of these were selected for reasons for being affordable and low maintenance. And again, to tie into kind of that industrial context of the surrounding. Another thing, if you go back, sorry, another thing that we thought about a lot was kind of how to design the lot in its entirety. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about not just the landscape and the courtyard in front, but the walls in themselves and how those could be designed. And so the CMU block wall that you can kind of see here behind the bamboo, that again relates to the materiality of the auto mechanic shop that we're nearby.
Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so now we're going to dive in a little bit into the interiors. And so this image is a good image. It's literally what we're looking at right now, sitting on the dining room table. This is our kitchen and dining room. And so we're just going to start kind of putting attention onto the floors. And so we worked with Christina Hardwood Flooring Company. They did a great job in installing these. We selected a Texas post oak floors. And so we selected this specifically because they're very resilient. They can really withstand. We have a large dog, and so we wanted something that could be resilient to our dog, but also to our children as they grow up. But that's the thing about this home is we knew that it wasn't a museum, or it was ultimately going to be a home for our family, which needed to endure our dog and our children. And really, so we'll talk about more about that and how kind of we really spent time thinking about this, just the selection of details, the selection of materials, but also the details of the home. And so also the Texas post oak is really interesting to us because it was locally sourced. I'm now going to kind of draw your attention to kind of this table. Ryan's going to talk in more detail about the details of this design and of this table, but it is a Texas pecan. And then a lot of the kind of cabinets and millwork were, if they were custom, we chose a white oak. And so you can see that here on the island and here for the upper cabinets. And there is a bank just right off the page here on the left that are also custom. For the lower cabinets, we really went more economical. We chose Ikea cabinets. And these are actually cabinets that Ryan built and installed during the pandemic, at the height of the pandemic. And so that was just a fun story. But again, we kind of leaned on Ikea for both the lower cabinets in the kitchen and all of our closets. We also used soapstone for the countertops here in the kitchen. And these were installed by Alpha Granite and selected at Architectural Tile and Stone. And for kind of our more detailed flourishes in the home, we really leaned on, again, the steel details. And so you can see that here as our kitchen backsplash and shelves. And then you can also see some shelves that you'll see here in the living room. And so here's a view of, like, again, kind of inverting looking out from the kitchen dining table out to, and this actually was like right after the freeze. And so you'll see later we have images of what it actually looks like now. But what I want to point out here are, again, those kind of steel shelves that you see here on the upper left-hand corner, but also kind of throughout the home, we really leaned on a Mexican influences on the furnishings, and also West Texas influences. And so again, as in my introduction, you might have heard, I'm born in Puebla, Mexico. And so that was really important to kind of tie into the identity of this home. And so here on the left-hand side, you see the flex room / guest bedrooms bathroom. And here I selected a tile that's on the edge of this page. It's kind of a blue tile that really reminded me of kind of the blue that's used for Talavera tile that's in from Puebla, Mexico, the city that I was born. And on the right-hand side, this is the children's bathroom, still kept quite simple, but I loved this sort of pink tile for the floor that was kind of a modern take on the Mexican saltillo tile. This is our main bathroom, and here we kept things quite more streamlined, excuse me, streamlined and minimal. And so we used plaster concrete walls, again, kind of inspired by modern Mexican architecture. And for the floors, we used a slate.
Yeah, and this is the main bedroom upstairs. And again, just from the cost-effective perspective, as Steph mentioned in her intro to the overall floor plan, we didn't put in any closets into any of the bedrooms and just used Ikea PAX system closets throughout. So that's even in the main bedroom with a bank of them here that we put in. These are actually Ikea fronts as well. So that was a huge like space-saving component of the house, which saved a lot of money, both in the cost of the millwork, but also just in the additional area of the house. And you'll see we've got these really wonderful Western sliders and a few key Western slider windows and doors in a few key areas downstairs, but primarily we used a really affordable fiberglass Marvin product for the main windows. And again, similar to that truss conversation of like using the inherent quality of the material, we did the same thing for the windows. So we knew we wanted this sort of big wrapped window upstairs. And we really just looked at what the maximum that we could do in the window system that we could afford and worked backwards from there, as opposed to, just starting with the architectural vision and then trying to find something more expensive to achieve that. So this next section that we're going to talk about is just titled Being a Good Neighbor. And so obviously, we've lived in this neighborhood since we've lived in Austin. And there's obviously a lot of sensitivity around gentrification, which could probably be its own presentation that we won't dive all the way into today, but suffice it to say, the most important thing for us, knowing that we were going to be continuing to live in this neighborhood, was to be a good neighbor, both personally and with the architecture. So, now on the personal side, we love our neighbors, we share food, we clean up the alley, everything that we can do to be a good neighbor when we're in the house. But before we moved in, we really wanted to think a lot about what the architecture could do to be a good neighbor. So we have a number of strategies in place to do that. So the first one was this massing strategy. So as we mentioned, as you saw from that earlier slide with the two smaller houses on either side of the lot, we knew that if we were going to be introducing a two-story building into a neighborhood that traditionally has these smaller one-story structures, that we didn't want to have that volume sort of dominating everything else. And so pushing the volume back, again, achieved a lot of goals, but we just knew right away that we just didn't want to be hanging over our neighbors. The other one is this sort of courtyard perimeter wall that goes around. It would have been really easy just to sort of like wrap the entire lot with a big unfriendly fence all the way around, but we tried to make sure there was moments of porosity that were interspersed between the CMU block walls. And then also on the front, instead of having the parking within a big wall, we pushed all that back. And so on Pleasant Valley, those privacy walls are actually aligned with our neighbors, the fronts of our neighbors' houses on either side to, again, not block their view. And then lastly, you see these sort of like pockets of landscape that are outside of the courtyard. So we knew we were going to have this sort of like intensely planted and landscaped inner courtyard. And we wanted to make sure that there was moments of that that sort of spilled outside of the home and could be enjoyed by our neighbors as well.
And also to beautify both the sidewalk in the front and kind of this side alley entrance as well.
Correct.
So now we're going to talk about another way of being a good neighbor was by working with great local collaborators. As we mentioned at the beginning of our presentation, we worked with Longhorn Welding for Clear Rock Ranch, and immediately when you walk into the home from the alley entrance, you see this kind of steel details that Longhorn Welding produced. And so this is kind of a wall niche where we can drop in our keys as we walk through the door. And this kind of wraps around into this kind of kitchen backsplashed area here and steel shelves. And another collaborator that we worked with was Sam from Fort Structures. Interestingly, Sam started his firm in around 2014, I believe, right around when we did. And so we've been friends from the beginning of starting our firms together. And so he's been a frequent collaborator of ours and also local to East Austin. And so it just really streamlines the process again to have good collaborators that we've had experience working with before. And lastly, we knew also how important it would be to work with a good builder. So we needed somebody that had built in East Austin before, but we also knew that we couldn't build this ourselves. Props to those design build firms out there, but we knew, Ryan and I, that we needed to still focus on our firm, on our firm and our clients that we had within our company, but we didn't want our personal home to be such a huge distraction. And so we knew that in order to make that happen, we really needed a good builder. And so we knew that Waller Build Company had built in East Austin, and that was really important to us. And so that is why we ultimately selected them. And we thought that they were just a fantastic collaborator throughout the whole process.
For sure. And another, as Stefan mentioned, this sort of central table that we are sitting at right now, which is just another sort of great story. So this was a pecan tree that was on the lot. It was just under protected size, and it was in a spot that we unfortunately needed to take it down. So we had it taken down, and Harvest Lumber, who we mentioned earlier from the downtown canopy, milled it for us into boards and then dried it over the course of 3 or 4 months in their kiln, which again are just like a block away from the house. And then another friend and previous collaborator and local fabricator, Pete Dahlberg, made this table for us. And so again, we just thought it's sort of like a great story about the local fabricators using the lot, but also using those elements in service of an architectural feature that actually reduces the square footage of the house. So we just thought that was a nice little story embedded in the house. And also one of the few moments that we actually got to detail things out of the note, talked about the sort of cost effectiveness and the affordability of this house. But as architects, we did want to at least control and own like a few little moments. And so here's a couple early sketch details that we worked with Longhorn Welding and John Ray to make sure that we had this very thin steel frame that could support this. And just jumping back, you can see it's all held up by this one steel plate underneath. And so we even worked with Sam and Fort Structures to make sure that we thickened our slab in that area. So again, one of the few like little detailed moments that we had a flourish on in the house. And another were just these 2 pivot doors that we did. Again, a nice little flourish. Again, it's like the moment where the house interfaces with the neighborhoods. We felt it was really important. And again, another little story, we had some extra Garapa wood from an old project sitting in our garage for at least 2 years, maybe 3 years, and finally got to reuse that on the door. So a nice little moment there as well. And you want to chat about that slide a little bit?
Oh, no, just sorry. I just want to also point out, like, we have this kind of steel gray entry that is also harping back to kind of that Clear Rock Ranch. And then just to point out another steel fabricated Longhorn Welding moment here, which is our mailbox and package delivery drop off there.
Exactly. But yeah, so a few fun details thrown in that were just really nice to work through, and they work with the fabricators to put together.
Right. So one other aspect of being a good neighbor, of course, is taking into account sustainability. And Ryan and I made it a priority from the outset and from the very beginning of the design of this home to set aside funds for solar power. And so we worked with Freedom Solar to really put the system in place from the beginning to really design this home to be 100%
yeah, the solar panel system offsets 100% of the energy, projected energy use of the home.
Yeah, so it's throughout a year. And so we really wanted to make that a priority from the beginning. And so in the next slide, you can kind of also see the site plan. Again, that shows those solar panels. And then In the back, you can see there's a design for the kind of system in place for the EV charging, again, for a future electric car. And we slope the roofs of both of these volumes in the back to kind of catch rainwater collection. And then we also worked with Sam from Fort Structures on having a system in place for a future green roof. And so those were all key components that we really designed from the beginning. That might not be all in place at the moment, particularly the green roof, but it's something that we wanted to think about for future when the funds kind of become available. And lastly, the native landscape, of course, is another real key component. And again, as we've mentioned throughout our whole presentation, was incredibly important to us from the beginning. And so here we can see the landscape plan. And so one thing I want to point out is that a lot of these plants were installed by ourselves. Ryan installed a lot of them. I helped, but I ultimately did select these. And again, this is harping back to my experience having worked at Michael Van Valkenburg Associates. It's something that we really wanted to kind of treat as a fun experiment. It's a side passion of mine. Again, we really just really value the landscape architecture component. And ultimately, there were over 150 plants that were selected and installed, mostly native. Again, this was inspired by having worked at NVVA, but also having spent many trips out to the Wildflower Center. If you're unfamiliar, it's a wonderful resource for native plants to Texas, and a place we love going with our children. And also, if you're not familiar, they have an amazing online database for just all the native plants. But we knew that I wanted to design this space for kind of all the seasons. And so it's really, a lot of these plants were selected and kind of their beauty, you know, it's really wonderful to watch kind of how they change over the seasons. And also, I want to point out that we really limited the kind of grass and kind of in this section. Ultimately, we knew that we needed a play space for our daughter and our children to play, and our dog as well. But we really wanted to limit water use. And so we kind of limited it to kind of this just front area here, but we ultimately used gravel everywhere else.
Yeah, and the plants also have pollinators as well.
Yeah, and so, sorry. And lastly, I'd like to kind of point out that these plants were also great pollinators for all the local birds, the bees, and our children as well. We very frequently see all the butterflies kind of fluttering around in our garden, as well as hummingbirds that come and visit as well.
Yeah. And again, I just wanted to highlight that this indoor-outdoor connection that we've been talking about, and that everything that we did with the architecture was really had the landscape in mind, had this courtyard in mind, all the way from moving the building back to setting up this really big front courtyard to putting in these beautiful Western sliders and sort of feature moment. They were all in service, even the wall, about making sure that this landscape was like an integral part of the experience of the project, and the architecture extended beyond the sort of edge of the building.
Yeah, so this is again a view from the kitchen here. And so this was really important to us for these, like, as Ryan was saying, these Western sliders to have that kind of visual connection. So a place where both of us can be cooking or hanging out in the living room and have that visual connection to the play space in front, so that we can keep an eye out on our daughter or our dog and our son in the future. And also kind of on a really nice day, just open up the slider and really have that kind of more direct indoor-outdoor quality to the home. This is looking at the landscape and kind of area from Pleasant Valley. And again, as Ryan mentioned, this wall specifically was pushed back to kind of provide more of a landscape and beautify the sidewalked area. Specifically, the plants selected here were more kind of a desert, more desert and water efficient plants. And so you can again see kind of how what you would see from across the street.
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of a side note on this is you can sort of see from this photo, this idea of the house being pushed back. It's sort of like almost being quiet on the street. You drive by, almost not see it, which again was very much the intent of the home.
And so here is kind of how you, when you turn the corner and you're entering the home from as a guest, and again, here's kind of the package mailbox drop off. And as you turn that corner, the kind of landscape becomes a little bit different. It becomes a little more dense and intentionally dense. And again, this is kind of a strategy that Michael Van Valkenburg Associates uses a lot in terms of densifying the plants and really bringing in kind of a more natural energy that you'd find kind of more in like a forested area. But what's incredibly exciting to us and something we're really proud of is kind of bringing that into the courtyard and into this more urban context. And also these kind of like loose, densely packed landscape and kind of pavers, yeah, it just kind of it brings contrast to kind of the modern architecture of the volume. Here you can see, if you go back, sorry, here you can also see just a fun story. Here's our daughter swinging off the pecan tree with Ryan pushing her and our dog kind of in the lawn space. But what's really fun is just kind of that connection also to this pecan tree. The whole neighborhood really, it just loves collecting the pecans, and Ryan really enjoys making pecan brittle for everybody during the holidays and passing it out. And so again, that's just kind of another way of being a good neighbor and tying into kind of that aspect of like what the landscape does for us to enjoy, but also for the neighbors to enjoy and kind of bring that sense of sustainability.
Yeah, and so just another beautiful shot of our daughter sort of playing outside. And I think the really like largest takeaway that we wanted to make sure was clear from this presentation that, you know, we're really proud of the architecture of the building itself, but ultimately what we think is most accessible about this project is how it relates to its context, right? So both from the broader East Austin context to sort of walkability for us personally, to our home, to the landscape, to the sort of urban fabric context. Like all of those pieces together is, to us, what makes this a successful project. Again, like we're very proud of, you know, the built structure we made, but we think it just the consideration for its context is what elevates it and makes it something that's really special to us.
And just to expand on that, I think, you know, the design of the architecture and the home itself, we really just saw as half of the design, like this landscape again, and the kind of peripheral walls really were just as important and kind of is what led to the success of the project. And so that's kind of a key lesson. I think we see even in our own projects, kind of landscape is left to the end, and it's sometimes value engineered out of the project. And I think that's a lesson in itself, is just kind of to make sure to kind of leave the funds, and something that was really important to us, and even difficult. As we said, we were on a budget, and so it was incredibly important to us to just make sure that we did leave the funds in the end to prioritize that landscape and those peripheral walls, so that we thought about the architecture holistically and of the whole site and how it related to its context. And so that's kind of the end of our presentation. And so again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we're really excited to be here, and we'll open it up for questions and hand it off back to Michael.
All right, thank you guys. I love this house. You guys can move out and I'll just move in and it'll be fun.
For two, right?
Be perfect, yeah.
Welcome anytime.
Yeah. Okay, so there are a couple of questions, but I wanted to ask one first, because I think it's, I don't know, it's really like, it's something we talked about. Now that you've done this for yourself, you know, not being the client, you know, usually we're the architect, they're the client, but now that you've gone through it, what would you want your client to know? Or what have you, I guess in the opposite of that, what have you learned?
Yeah, what have we learned? And I think, man, there's so many, but I think that idea of really holistically looking at the entire project together, as opposed to just the architecture, you know, just the building itself, is just a huge lesson that's tough to kind of explain to a client early. And then that idea as well, that like there are some sort of like, if you're looking for a more cost-effective project, like there are some inherent qualities to whether it's the materials or the structure or the window systems that, we can sketch the most beautiful piece of architecture on paper, but making sure that it's really buildable with those, components that you have that fit your budget, I think was really important for us. Right. Got more that I'm missing on that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's always a challenge. I mean, the budget is always hard. And so just again, also working with like really great team, the builder and having all of our great partners is what kind of leads to the success of the project, and reaching out to the builders early on like, as Ryan and I mentioned or in the presentation, kind of doing a sort of quick sketch of the design and kind of we checked in with Waller kind of pretty early, like even pre-schematic design, I think, to just kind of gut check on like where we stood. And we knew from the beginning that we were a little bit beyond our means, but we stretched. And again, I think that's the goal, as I was mentioning at the end of the presentation, is just like really trying to plan ahead and get a good builder on board to really, provide those kind of cost estimates early on and really plan. Again, kind of designing the whole house holistically, plan on having money set aside for landscape, plan on having money set aside for those kind of walls, because I think if or gates or peripheral context, because if that's important to the project, make sure that it's left, that you have money for it from the beginning.
I mean, I think you also said like going through the financing process was great for you.
Yes, exactly. I think that's something that we were not as familiar with, where we always came at it just as the architects and the designers, but now it's been pretty eye-opening to kind of work through the bank loans and all those processes, and that makes us also more familiar with how that works for our clients. And so that was another great lesson throughout the process.
So this is kind of going to touch on a couple of the questions that are over there. But what about your priorities? Did you come up with them first, or did you develop them as they went? We all know there's scope creep and that happens. So what did you do to avoid that?
Of course. Yeah. And I think that was something that was a lesson that we took really early on in the project. We, again, were like so paralyzed by the expense of the whole project that we knew that anything that we thought wasn't going to make it into the final project, we just designed out from the beginning. So, often that's really hard with a client, right? Where you want to show, you want to show what you can do. You want to show everything that's asked for. And then oftentimes we have been in a process where we're sort of taking things out at the very end of the project when the pricing is so high. But I think that for us, again, that was like maybe something that was a fun dynamic between the two of us. But yeah, we were just like, anything that might not be there, let's take it out. So, there's no garage, there's no huge deck, there's no carport, there's no roof deck, there's no patio, like there's no balcony, like all these things that we thought about. And again, instead of putting them in and detailing them and like falling in love with them, we've sort of said like, it's not completely integral to the project.
Ryan likes to call it the shrink wrap house, and I'll admit I had moments where I was like, well, let's design, a roof deck from the main bedroom that kind of overlooks the landscape. And Ryan was like, no, we got to be disciplined. And he was right, of course, and just really needed, and it was already a stretch, and we had to stretch to kind of even make the landscape and the important moments work. And so I think that was also really important. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see. There's one at the top I want to ask in a second, but there's one that I think is important that you and I hadn't talked about before. And see, so someone else who also designed their own homes, an architect, said, do you have thoughts about how the house will grow with you and your children? Is this something you thought about?
Yeah, so that was, we just, as we mentioned, had a son, our second child 2 months ago. So that was something that we knew was going to be, we wanted to happen. And so, we sort of planned for our, slightly growing family moving forward, because the home itself is so sort of, again, designed as a complete building. There certainly wasn't any sort of like expandability or sort of actually changing the home. It was felt as like a very static thing. But lots of little pieces about just like we first moved in, our daughter couldn't, play outside, and again, pick the pecans, and like just changing out the back room to be a little more of a playroom, like just those little things as you grow as a family. But I think we did think of it as a pretty static structure.
And I think it also importantly, we just like designed it to kind of have unfussy details, like, and a resilient, like again, like the floor, concrete floors, Texas post oak, super resilient, baseboard, just like very simple trimming, nothing too fussy that's overly, like there's nothing in the house that is too breakable. And so I think that was, definitely important for them, how they grow. But, and again, that flex room in the back was another way of kind of thinking about the future, and how I can already see our children as teenagers just hanging out back there and doing, having their more privacy kind of in the back. And so that's kind of how we see it kind of work over the years.
But a sort of like tangent to that, it's not exactly answering it, but I think, it was really interesting for us to design something this contemporary, which again, all the way back from school and work with clients, like we've always, had this great interest and passion in these interesting forms and just actually living in this home that it was interesting to have to inhabit it and understand how some of the architectural moves, like really inhabiting it is just very different than seeing it on paper, right? And so even just like having this super, super open living, dining, kitchen, but on a compact footprint, for a lot of our clients, we explain, like, if you're going to have everything really open, you need to make sure that there's enough storage to like put everything away, but like actually being disciplined about that is like a whole other, like infiltrates your life and how you live in this space. So we are learning from the building. I'm sure that we will like continue to grow, as human beings and as architects in the building, as we learn how it ages and what it takes to sort of live in it the way that we want to.
Yeah, I think you kind of said that to me whenever we were talking, but you kind of designed it for a family, thinking about that.
For sure.
Absolutely.
You knew there was going to be a dog in there. It's like, what do we do? You knew you were going to what do we do?
Yeah. And we really try to just think about like the spaces that they would all inhabit and kind of how we can tidy things up, and, the custom millwork in the kitchen, and, we hide the microwave, we kind of put everything away. Which is kind of another way we've kind of lived into. But I think like that back flex room became, the more we realized living here, like our daughter loves just to play and be with us. And it's, she has all these toys, like we realized the back room kind of also needed to be a little more flexible for her as well.
Oh, the toys. Yes.
So many toys.
Let me see this top one just a minute. Was it tough to design a home as a couple and firm partners?
Yeah, so
we've been working that's a good question. And the funny thing is, we started the company in 2014, as we were saying at the beginning of our presentation, and I feel like at this point have been working together for so long, we've really ironed out kind of the dynamic. To be honest, it was not difficult. I mean, there were moments where I think I worked on kind of like we each know our strengths. And so, like I was kind of working on the finishes and the landscape, and we worked on the volumes together. Ryan was working on kind of the steel details a little bit more. And but I think, we've just really have over the years ironed out kind of that dynamic. And I think I know it's not easy for everyone, and it took a little bit of ironing out, particularly at the beginning of starting our firm. But I think at this point it's pretty much easy.
And easier. We also had a great so we mentioned our office was a home that we lived in, and then we like made it half office and half home right before we moved in here. And we had done a little addition on that project together a couple of years ago, or like 4, 5, 6, I don't know, 6 years ago now, whatever it was. But that one, we were really rushed. We had no money at all. We like you were pregnant. We like
love to keep things complicated.
Yeah, but we didn't really like put it on paper as much as we should have. It was just a more like that particularly chaotic time in our lives. And so
I think literally, sorry, just I know our daughter was born and the office was still under construction.
Yeah, they were still putting in like the tile and everything. It was a bit of a disaster. But the point was is that we had went through that little experience. So aside from just getting better at working together professionally, and again, we like literally work together every single day. So we're pretty lucky to know how to work together at this point, but we'd also gone through this other little tiny project and sort of learned the lessons of like what we didn't want to do. So we knew we wanted to like put everything on paper and like, you know, just do what we tell our clients to do, detail it properly and price it properly. And like, I think that first little one, we're like, oh, like, we don't need to do that. We, you know, it's just a little thing. And it was fine. But we really,
it was a bit of a mess. And I think we definitely, you're right. We learned a lot from that experience and realized like we wanted to do this right.
Yeah. And so all the way down, you know, making sure that all those tile selections are actually picked and actually in the budget, you know, like
Working
before,
with a good
like
builder.
working with a good builder, like all these little things. We'd sort of at least, again, they're all the things we tell our clients all the time. But for some reason, when we did it ourselves, we were like, like, we don't need to do that stuff. So we implemented what we tell our clients all the time, which unfortunately worked out really well.
That's good. Okay, so there's a quick question, and I have one that I just like to sort of end with. Someone wants to know if you do both residential and commercial.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Yeah, at the beginning, we were trying to highlight a lot of our commercial spaces. We do ground up commercial spaces. We intentionally like to take on both residential and commercial and everything in between. I think we like to keep things interesting. It just really, it's fun to just kind of think outside of the box and approach each project with a unique perspective. And so, yeah, we love doing everything.
Yeah, and I think some of the lessons that we tried to highlight on this project in terms of like the site sensitivity, the landscape sensitivity, you know, the sort of like material sensitivity to its context, like those are all lessons that we apply across the board. You know, they're not specific to residential at all.
Absolutely.
And so obviously residential is a unique medium to work in as an architect, but yeah, we definitely find that the sort of sensitivity to the human scale that we get from our residential work is like really an asset when we work on larger commercial projects. And then just like vice versa, some of the more engineering components that we learn from the commercial, or again, that sort of site context that you might not always get with residential is a great asset on the residential side. So that was a long answer, but yes, we work on both.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we only have like 4 minutes left.
Yeah.
But just so I guess to finish us off, do you have a favorite part of your house?
Favorite part of the house.
I mean,
I did not prep you for this. Just
I know.
I'm gonna say again, I'm biased. I love the landscape. I love like on weekends. I like going to Tillery Plant Company just down the street and picking up something and just like with my daughter, like planting in the back planters and having her. It's just really fun. And again, just observing kind of that indoor outdoor connection, looking out, like when you're in the kitchen, it's just like experiencing it on a regular day, on a regular basis and looking out. And I love watching the hummingbirds. Like I said, it's really just really fun. So that's my favorite part.
Yeah. And I think really broadly, it's just, yeah, it's not like a piece in particular, but I mean, yeah, we just like Steph and I didn't grow up in houses like this. You know, we were in little apartments in New York and Boston and you know, little rundown houses in East Austin before. And so, I mean, we were literally every day, just like look around sometimes and just like, I can't believe that this house is in this place and it's something that we get to be in every day. And so we're just like having a new home that's like, you know, that you've been able to think about and sort of like create with your professional experience. I mean, it's just, it is pretty special to be able to live in that. And it's so, again, so different for us that it's pretty cheesy, but like it literally every day, we're like, wow, this is so awesome. We're so happy to be here.
Happy.
So it's not a specific piece, but just like making it happen, being in it is great. So we feel really, really lucky, really fortunate to be able just to be in this house. So that's
especially post-pandemic, because we were stuck in an apartment for a little while.
Yes.
Our daughter, you know, really needed some room to play. And so, yeah.
Exactly. So that's, yeah, the whole thing, Michael, the whole thing. We love it all.
Well, okay. I guess we have about 2 minutes left. So I feel like that's great.
Well, yeah, thank you. I just want to thank everyone for coming and for listening to us. And again, I guess this will all be available during the tour. So we hope you guys can make it to the house.
Please come say hello to us.
We'll be here to say hey. So come on by and say hey, check it out.
Come see our home, please. Yeah, thank you for joining. Thank you, Michael, and thank you, Ingrid. And again, thank you to the Home Store Committee for having us.
Thank you, everyone, for being here.
Perfect.
All right.